That night, I slept in my truck. Not a hotel parking lot, not a campground, not somewhere with a bathroom nearby. Just a Walmart parking lot off Route 9 in Clarksville, with the seat reclined as far as it would go and my coat pulled up over my shoulders like a blanket. I was 63 years old. I had a master's degree in mechanical engineering. I had spent 31 years designing components for aerospace manufacturers, and I was sleeping in a 2009 Ford F-150 because I had nowhere else to go. I kept thinking about something my wife Patricia used to say. She'd say, "Frank, you plan for everything except the things that actually happen." She wasn't wrong. I planned for retirement. I planned for college funds. I planned for the mortgage to be paid off before I turned 60. I did not plan for stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I did not plan for 17 months of treatment that burned through our savings, our retirement accounts, and finally, the equity in the house we'd owned for 22 years. And I did not plan for the moment, 8 months after Patricia passed, when the bank finally sent the letter that made everything official. I had one suitcase in the bed of the truck. The rest of it, the furniture, the dishes, the boxes of her things I hadn't been able to go through yet, was in a storage unit in Clarksville that I was paying $68 a month for. I had $11,000 left in checking. I had my truck, my tools, and a phone that kept buzzing with notifications I didn't have the energy to read. I drove to my daughter's house because I didn't know where else to go. Claire lives about 40 minutes north, in a suburb outside Nashville. She and her husband Nathan bought a house there 3 years ago, a big colonial with a finished basement and a 3-car garage. I had helped with the down payment, not a loan, a gift, because that's what Patricia and I agreed was right. $30,000. We told them not to worry about paying it back. I pulled into their driveway around 8 in the evening on a Thursday. Claire's car was there. Nathan's truck was there. The lights were on in the kitchen. Through the front window I could see the flicker of the television in the living room. I sat in my truck for a few minutes before going out to the door. I don't know why I hesitated. Maybe some part of me already knew. Claire answered the door with her phone in her hand. She looked surprised to see me. Then she looked at the suitcase by my feet, and something shifted in her expression. Not concern. Something more careful than that. "Dad," she said, "you should have called." I told her I was sorry, that things had moved faster than I expected with the house. I asked if I could stay for a couple of weeks, just long enough to figure out next steps. I had already been looking at apartments, I told her. I just needed somewhere to land. She looked back over her shoulder into the house. Then she stepped halfway out onto the porch and half closed the door behind her. "Dad, I need to talk to Nathan about this first. He's really particular about the space. You know how he is." I did know how he was. I had known for years how he was. But I nodded and said, "Of course, take your time." She told me to come back inside and wait in the kitchen. She poured me a glass of water and then disappeared down the hall. I sat at their kitchen island for 22 minutes. I counted because I had nothing else to do. When Claire came back, she couldn't quite look at me directly. She sat down across the island and folded her hands on the counter and said, "Dad, this really isn't a good time for us. We've got a lot going on right now. Nathan's worried about the disruption, and honestly, with the spare room being used as a home office, we just don't have the space." I looked at her. My daughter. I had coached her soccer team when she was 9. I had driven her to college in this same truck. I had held her hand in the hospital parking lot when she called me crying about her first miscarriage. "I'll sleep on the couch," I said. "Dad." 2 weeks, Claire, that's all I'm asking." She looked down at her hands. "I think it would just create too much tension. Nathan really needs his space. I'm sorry." I picked up my suitcase. I told her it was fine. I don't know why I told her it was fine, because it was not fine, but I said it anyway because I could not think of anything else to say that wouldn't shatter something permanently. I walked back out to the truck and I sat there in their driveway for a moment with the engine off. The porch light went out. I drove back down to the Walmart on Route 9, and I parked in the far corner of the lot away from the streetlights, and I reclined the seat, and I lay there in the dark thinking about Patricia and thinking about all the things I used to know about my own life. All the things I used to feel certain about. By midnight, I had stopped thinking and just stared at the ceiling of the cab. I had been a senior design engineer at Worthington Aerospace for most of my career. Good salary, solid pension, the kind of job people used to call a good American job before that phrase became nostalgic. I retired at 61, 2 years before Patricia got sick, and we had plans. Portugal was on the list. A road trip up the Pacific Coast Highway. More time with the grandkids Claire kept saying were coming someday. Then came the diagnosis, and the plans became something else entirely. I don't want to spend too long on those 17 months because they belong to Patricia, not to me. What I'll say is this. She was braver than anyone I have ever known. She made peace with things I still haven't made peace with. She asked me in one of her last clear weeks not to disappear into my grief. "Don't go underground, Frank," she said. "You're not built for it." I went underground anyway. For 8 months after she passed, I mostly just maintained. I paid the bills, I kept the house clean, I answered emails. I went through the motions of being a person while something essential in me had quietly gone offline. The bankruptcy process was not dramatic. It was paperwork. It was phone calls with a lawyer named Henderson who explained things to me in a patient, measured tone that made me feel like a very slow student. The house went to auction in late October. I had 30 days to vacate. I spent 3 of those days trying to figure out where to go. I had a younger brother in Phoenix, but we'd been distant for years, and I didn't feel right calling him out of nowhere. I had friends from work, but they were the kind of friends you have lunch with, not the kind you call when you need somewhere to sleep. Patricia's sister offered, God bless her, but she was 81 years old and lived alone in a studio apartment in Chattanooga. I drove to Claire's house because she was my daughter, and she had a finished basement, and I had given her $30,000, and I thought that meant something. I found out what it meant that Thursday night in the Walmart parking lot. The next morning, I was stiff and cold and needed coffee badly. I went inside and bought a large coffee and a breakfast sandwich and sat at one of those little tables by the window and tried to make a list on my phone of practical next steps. The Walmart was already busy for 7 in the morning. Families, mostly. A lot of seniors, the kind who come early before the crowds. I watched them moving through the aisles with their carts, and I tried not to feel sorry for myself, which was harder than it sounds. I was on my second cup when someone sat down across from me. He was old, older than me. I'd have guessed mid-70s, maybe pushing 80. Small man, thin, with the kind of posture that suggested he had once stood straighter. He was wearing a fleece vest over a button-down shirt, and he was carrying a cup of coffee and a newspaper that nobody buys anymore. "You look like a man with a decision to make," he said. I told him I looked like a man who slept in his truck. He smiled at that. He introduced himself as Gerald Whitmore. I told him my name. We shook hands the old-fashioned way, a real handshake, and I remember thinking that I hadn't had a real handshake in months. He asked if I minded the company. I told him no. We talked for almost 2 hours. I don't remember exactly how it all came out. It wasn't like I intended to tell him my whole situation, but there's something about a stranger who asks good questions and doesn't rush you. He asked about the house, about Patricia, about my career. He asked what I was good at. He asked what I had planned to do with the rest of my life before things went sideways. He was a good listener. The kind that makes you feel like what you're saying is actually interesting. When I finally ran down, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me for a moment. "Would you be willing to meet with me again?" he said. "There's something I'd like to propose." I told him I had a fairly open calendar. He laughed. It was a good laugh, the kind old men have when they've stopped worrying about looking dignified. He gave me his card. It said Gerald Whitmore, Whitmore Industrial Holdings. He told me his assistant would reach out to set something up. He stood up, picked up his newspaper, and walked toward the exit with the careful pace of a man managing pain in his knees. I sat there holding his card for a long time. 3 days later, I was sitting in the lobby of a building in downtown Nashville that had Gerald Whitmore's name on a small brass plaque by the elevator. Not a skyscraper, not a monument to wealth. Just a clean, professional office building on a quiet block. The lobby had marble floors and a painting on the wall that looked expensive without announcing itself. A young woman named Priscilla brought me coffee and told me Mr. Whitmore would be right with me. I sat in a leather chair and tried to look like someone who regularly sat in leather chairs in downtown Nashville. Gerald came out after 10 minutes. He moved slowly but purposefully. He shook my hand again, led me into a corner office with a window that looked out over the Cumberland River, and sat down across from me. He told me he was dying. Not dramatically, just plainly the way you'd state any fact. Congestive heart failure, he said. His doctors had given him somewhere between 4 and 8 months. He had made peace with the number. "I have a problem," he said, "and I think you might be the solution." He explained it like this. He had built Whitmore Industrial Holdings over 40 years, manufacturing components primarily, not unlike what I had done at Worthington, just from the ownership side. He had no children. His wife had passed 11 years ago. He had a niece in Seattle who he described as lovely but completely uninterested in business. And he had spent the better part of 2 years trying to figure out what would happen to the company when he was gone. He had interviewed candidates. He had consulted with lawyers and financial advisors and a business broker. He had not found what he was looking for. "What are you looking for?" I asked. "Someone who understands the work," he said. "Not just the numbers, the actual work," he said. "Not just the numbers, the actual work. What it takes to build something and keep it running and take care of the people who depend on it." He slid a folder across the desk toward me. "I'd like you to come work with me for 60 days, learn the operation, meet the team, see if it's something you'd want to carry forward." I opened the folder. The company had 47 employees. Annual revenue was listed in the folder. I won't say the number out loud, but I will say that when I saw it, I had to read it twice. "Why me?" I asked. "You met me in a Walmart." "I know who you are, Frank," he said. "I looked you up after we talked. 31 years at Worthington. You led the tolerancing team on the Halcyon project. That was my component spec you were working to." He paused. "Small world." I sat with that for a moment. "What would happen to the employees if I said no?" I asked. He looked at me steadily. "That's exactly why I'm asking you. I spent 60 days at Whitmore Industrial Holdings. I slept on a cot in Gerald's guest cottage on his property outside Brentwood, which was better than the truck by every measure. I ate breakfast with him 3 or 4 mornings a week. We talked about manufacturing, about management, about what it took to build something that outlasted you. He was the sharpest old man I had ever met. He was also kind in the specific way that people are kind when they don't need anything from you. I met the team, 47 people, most of them middle-aged, a handful of younger machinists. 2 women in operations who kept the whole thing running in ways that were not reflected in anyone's job title. I learned the contracts, the clients, the supply chain, the equipment maintenance schedule. I stayed late. I asked a lot of questions. I tried to be useful rather than impressive. Gerald was in and out of the office. Good weeks and bad weeks, he called them. On the bad weeks, I ran things myself and reported back to him in the evenings. On a Tuesday in early January, Gerald called me into his office and told me he was having his attorney draw up the paperwork. He wanted to transfer controlling interest in the company to me. Not a purchase, not a loan. A transfer, contingent on my agreement to maintain operations and employment for a minimum of 5 years. I told him I didn't know what to say. "Then don't say anything yet," he said. "Go home. Think about it. Tell me Thursday." I went back to the guest cottage and sat on the small porch in the January cold and thought about Patricia telling me not to go underground. I thought about the Walmart parking lot. I thought about 47 people who showed up every morning and did good work and deserved someone at the top who understood what that meant. I called Gerald on Thursday morning and told him yes. Gerald passed in March, quietly at home with his niece from Seattle by his side. I was grateful she'd come. I sat in the back at the memorial service, and afterward I went back to the office and told the team what had happened and what it meant for the company going forward. Nobody cried, but a few people got close. I was officially the owner of Whitmore Industrial Holdings on a Thursday in April. Priscilla brought champagne that nobody really knew what to do with at 9 in the morning, so we put it in the break room refrigerator for lunch. By 9:15, I was back on my desk working through a contract renewal. That evening my phone rang and it was Claire. She'd heard. I don't know how, probably mutual acquaintances, probably something that appeared somewhere and traveled the way news travels in a connected world. She sounded warm in a way that felt freshly applied, like a coat of paint over something that hadn't been properly primed. "Dad," she said, "I've been thinking about you so much. I'm so sorry about how things went last fall. Nathan and I talked, and we really feel terrible about that. We'd love to have you for dinner. Sunday? Nathan wants to make his ribs." I said I appreciated the call. "We miss you," she said. "Really. And we want to hear everything. How are you doing? What's been going on?" There was a quality to it, the warmth, the sudden interest, the careful way she avoided mentioning the house or the money or the fact that she had turned off her porch light while I was still sitting in her driveway. It reminded me of something I couldn't quite place. 2 days later, I found out what it reminded me of. I had given Priscilla my cell number for office use, and she was meticulous about what she forwarded to it, so when a text came through from an unfamiliar number, I almost didn't check it. But I did check it, and it was from Gerald's attorney, a man named Caldwell who'd been handling the estate, professional and precise in all our dealings, and it said, "Mr. Abernathy, Gerald asked me to send you this after the transfer was finalized. His instructions were that you should have it when you were ready." Attached was an audio file. I almost didn't listen to it that night, but I did. It was a recording, not of Gerald. I recognized the voices immediately. It was Claire and Nathan. The audio quality suggested it had been captured on something small and discreet, and Caldwell's cover note explained that Gerald had employed a private investigation firm during his evaluation process. He wrote in a letter that came with the file, not apologetic about due diligence. On the recording, Nathan was talking. He was saying that they needed to be careful, that if they pushed too hard too soon, it would look obvious. Claire was saying she knew, but 60 days had already gone by and they had no idea what was actually in the paperwork. Nathan said the thing to do was to get me to dinner, get me comfortable, make me feel like family again. Claire said, "He's always been soft when it comes to me. I just have to remind him of that." Nathan said, "Just don't mention the 30 grand yet." I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after that recording ended. I thought about the porch light going out. I thought about 22 minutes at their kitchen island. I thought about Nathan really needs his space. I thought about Patricia, who had known Nathan for years and never once said she liked him, just that he was Claire's choice and she respected Claire's choices. I thought about how Patricia had pressed my hand in her last weeks and told me to watch out for myself because I was too trusting and she wouldn't be there to catch me. I did not call Claire back about Sunday dinner. What I did instead was call a lawyer. Not Caldwell. A different one, someone who specialized in family estate matters, a woman named Hoffman who came highly recommended and who listened to the whole situation without visible judgment and then said in a calm and practical voice, "You don't owe anyone anything, Mr. Abernathy. Let's just make sure you're protected." We had several more conversations over the following weeks. Claire called twice more. Nathan sent a single text that said they were worried about me. I responded to neither. I bought a house in early May, not a grand statement of wealth, not a sprawling property designed to announce anything. A 4-bedroom craftsman in East Nashville with a big covered porch and a yard that needed work and a kitchen with good bones that reminded me a little of the one Patricia and I had in Clarksville. I spent 2 weekends stripping the old deck stain and restaining it myself, which I did not need to do and which was exactly what I needed to do. Gerald had left me a note in the letter that came with the recording. Not about business, not about the transfer. He wrote, "The company is yours now, Frank. The work is real and the people are good. Don't let anyone talk you into being smaller than you are. Your wife was right about you. I could tell from the way you talked about her." I read that part several times. I had asked him once during one of those early morning breakfasts in Brentwood how he'd known to trust me. Just from a conversation in a Walmart. He'd looked at me over his coffee cup and said, "You asked about the employees before you asked about the money. That told me everything I needed to know." It is a Tuesday evening in June as I write this, and I am sitting on the porch. I refinished myself, and there is a particular quality to the air that comes at dusk in Nashville in early summer. A little humid, smelling of cut grass and something blooming that I never learned the name of. I am not a billionaire. I want to be clear about that. I am a 63-year-old man who owns a manufacturing company with 47 employees, a craftsman house in East Nashville, and a truck that needs its brakes looked at. My net worth has gone from nearly zero to something substantial, and I'm still adjusting to what that means and what I want to do with it. What I know is this. I don't want to do anything with it that Patricia wouldn't have recognized as me. I've started volunteering twice a week at a workforce development program on the East Side, a program that helps adults over 50 re-enter the job market after career disruption or illness in the family. I sit across the table from people who look like I looked in that Walmart parking lot, and I try to ask good questions and not rush them. It's not nothing. Claire texted me last week. She said she hoped I was doing well and that she and Nathan would love to reconnect. She said she was sorry again, and that she hoped I could understand how hard everything had been for them too during that time. I read it twice. I thought about what to say for a while. Then I put the phone down and went back to what I was doing. Some things you can forgive, and some things you can simply stop carrying. I'm not sure which one this is yet. Maybe it's neither. Maybe it's just something that happened that tells me everything I need to know about who was actually there. Patricia used to say that the people who show up when there's nothing in it for them, those are your people. She had a way of reducing things to what they actually were. Gerald showed up in a Walmart. He didn't know about the company yet. I didn't know about the company yet. I didn't know about the company yet. He just sat down across from a man who looked like he had a decision to make and asked if he minded the company. Those 47 people show up every morning and run good equipment and do honest work and trust that someone at the top gives a damn. Those are my people. The porch light stays on out here. It's been on every night since I moved in. I'm not sure why I keep noticing that, but I do. I keep noticing it every single night. I've been thinking a lot lately about what Gerald said to me that morning in his office in downtown Nashville. He said I asked about the employees before I asked about the money, and that told him everything he needed to know. I've turned that over in my mind more times than I can count, because I don't think he was just talking about a job interview. I think he was describing the one thing that actually determines how a life turns out. What you reach for first. When you're scared, when there's nothing in it for you. When nobody's watching. That's who you are. Not who you intend to be. Who you actually are. I wasn't a saint. I made mistakes across 63 years that I'm not proud of. I stayed too long in my own grief after Patricia passed. I let the house situation get further than it should have before I asked for help. And if I'm being honest, part of me wants to believe that Claire is just in a bad marriage and that she'll eventually find her way back to being the person I raised. I don't know if that's true. What I know is I can't build my life around waiting to find out. There's a kind of wisdom that only comes from losing things. Not the comfortable, inspirational version of that idea, the real version, where you're sitting in a parking lot at midnight and you have to decide whether you're going to let this break you or not. I didn't make some heroic decision that night, I just didn't fall apart. And the next morning I bought a cup of coffee and a breakfast sandwich, and I sat by the window, and a stranger sat down across from me, and something shifted. What I've come to understand is that the world tends to respond to how you carry yourself when you have nothing left to prove. Gerald didn't know about the company when he sat down. He just saw a man who was still thinking clearly, still showing up, still trying to figure out the next right step. That's what he was looking for. Not a resume, not a track record. The thing underneath all of that. The people who came to my worst moment with open hands. Gerald, Priscilla. Those 47 people who showed up every morning and trusted whoever was at the top to give a damn. They didn't know me from a stranger. They responded to something I was putting out without knowing it. And a person who had known me for 30 years, who I had held in a hospital parking lot, who I had written a check for without hesitation, she responded to something too. I think she responded to what she thought I no longer had. That tells you everything. I don't think life keeps a ledger. I don't think there's a system that tracks your good decisions and pays them out at the right time. But I do think that how you treat people when it costs you something, when you're tired, when you're scared, when there's nothing coming back to you, that shapes what you become, and what you become determines who finds you. Gerald found a man worth trusting because I had spent 31 years trying to be one. Claire found a father she thought she could use because somewhere along the way she had stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. Neither of those things happened overnight. Both of them were the result of thousands of small decisions made over years that added up to a truth. The porch light is on tonight. I put it on every evening now, not for anyone in particular, just as a reminder that this house is a place where people are welcome. That's the kind of person I want to be. That's the only inheritance that matters. Not what you leave behind in a will, but what you leave behind in the people who watched how you lived. Patricia knew that. Gerald knew it too. I'm still learning it, but I'm learning it with the light on.